The golden liquid. Leonardo and Tatutida were escorted in a large room with the ambience of peace and a view of beauty. He went to the balcony and from afar he could barely see a wide river ahead as huge rocky cliffs covered by low thick dark clouds rose out. Below him were trees leading to a more and wide forested area. He was seeing the north side of Ozulbeneg. He looked to his left and he could barely see the hills of another land as the sky was beginning to get dark. He walked back inside the room and saw the nougat touching the shiny dark red wall of the room, like a child curious of his new surrounding. Then, he recalled something. Tatutida, why did you not tell me? Tatutida turned his back hearing the words of Leonardo. At first he was wondering what the question was, then realized what Leonardo was asking. He sensed that it would be a long discussion judging from a serious and inquisitive face that Leonardo had flashed before him. He walked slowly onto a chair and sat down while motioning for Leonardo to come near him. Leonardo moved and sat on the other chair facing the small shadow in front of him. Tatutida raised his face. He knew what Leonardo wanted to know. He had been in the West for years, entered the walls of many kinds unknowingly. Surely, he had seen Piccola. He spoke slowly and sincerely. I did not trust you in the beginning though you saved my life. I thought you were like the others, the first time I saw you. I never thought that we will end up here, together, in Ozulbeneg. I thought, after you saved me, we would go on our separate paths, if you will let me live, and so I thought it was no more necessary to tell you for you will find out yourself about it. Then, things happened fast and the moment my trust in you solidified, telling about Piccola is no longer relevant, for you had already seen it. What had happened made me conclude that you are different from the others, the language you use, the way you speak, the way you think, the way you act, the distinct traditions you follow that resemble the ways of the kinds that I know of from the Middle North. You and your ways confused and disturbed me. Truths were clashing within that created more and more unanswered questions in me about you. I couldn't put all the pieces together but I have decided to accept it and erased all my doubts and fear about you seeing more truth and reality myself before my very eyes being with you. Tatutida paused and looked at Leonardo. When you are in your twilight years and have seen many things in life already, you make general conclusions about anything from your experiences, but you are a rare exception that challenged everything that I have believed in. The same belief that failed to justify my usual right prejudices. Leonardo's mind ran hearing the spoken words of Tatutida. What are the other truths, Tatutida? And who are the others that you were telling me? Tatutida was about to answer Leonardo's questions when two red guards entered their room and spoke, telling them that the king was inviting them for dinner at the dining hall a floor down from their room. They were there to lead them. Leonardo looked at the guards and nodded. He looked at Tatutida. We will continue this conversation after dinner and you must tell me everything. I have more questions that I know you have an answer on and those questions were the reasons I left a beautiful life in someplace. He almost mentioned Mathicus but he knew he would when the right time comes. His trust with Tatutida had also solidified, seeing Tatutida as like him but inside he knew he was much fortunate than him for he did not see the evilness of the world and he still had a home to go back to. At a long dinner table, Leonardo saw it filled with fruits, meat, bread, pastries and small container made of clay filled with wine. A guard pulled a chair at the edge of the long table as they led the nougat to the other end and made him sit. The table could fill 30 at a time but they were the only ones still sitting. Moments later, they heard a door open, and there emerged the king together with Dianat and other aged Ozulbenegs in red clothes. The aged Ozulbenegs, the king's advisors, were surprised seeing their guest. Almost all of them said the same thing. Piccola. Piccola. After meeting Leonardo and Tatutida, King Didi called his advisors into his chamber in secret. He told them of his earlier meeting with their visitors and why he had to tell them to leave. The advisors were listening intently and some were all in disbelief learning that Leonardo resembled their god Piccola. The chamber suddenly erupted into discussions and debates while King Didi was just listening as each of his advisors gave their own points of view. Some referred to their history while the others were wondering what was going to happen if the Ozulbenegs learned about Leonardo. Ever since King Didi came into the throne, he effected many changes at Ozulbeneg. The kings before him with the exception of his slain brother, did nothing great for the Ozulbenegs. All they ever wanted was the annihilation of the Zixes as advised by the Red's reasoning that as long as there were Zixes, Ozulbenegs would never be at peace. This was the reason why many Red soldiers stayed in Ozulbeneg then. Since his brother, King Ajahn, came into power, he stopped their offensive against the Zixes reasoning out that they were not interested with the Dika Mountains nor the death of all the Zixes. To him, so long as the Ozulbeneg village was safe they did not need to be on the offensive though they would defend the village against the attack of the Zixes. He began reducing the Red soldiers by sending them back to the Red land and this made some Red officers furious. They were telling King Ajahn that he was making a big mistake for the village would fall if he reduced his force. To King Ajah's mind, it was the right choice. The proliferation of many Redf soldiers at Ozulbaneg and many Redf traders were polluting the village with their lustful ways. Ozulbaneg females were learning to become prostitutes and Ozulbaneg males were losing respect with the elders and their wives, while many young Ozulbanegs were becoming addicted with Kajuna, and many others that the Redfs introduced into the Ozulbaneg land. What King Ajahn was seeing was the transformation of the village from a peaceful and culture-rich Ozulbanegs into disrespectful and unmindful Ozulbanegs. He thought it was better that the village fell under the Zix's hands than it fell under the worldly traditions of the Redfs. Through the years, he was able to reduce the Redf army and also the traders that came along with them. He became unpopular to some Ozulbanegs who were dependents on the Redf soldiers and the Redf traders for their living. They rebelled against him and his policies, but many Ozulbanegs began to see what he was doing and loved him more. The occasional attacks of the Zixes were nothing but only brought forth by accidental meetings of the Zixes and Ozulbanegs in their search for food and resources in the forest that they shared. Their past history made them fight each time they would meet in the forest because of the Redfs who were with the Ozulbanegs. The Redfs would always tell King Ajahn that the Zixes were just waiting for the right time to attack each time a battle in the forest happened or when some Ozulbanegs never returned from farming in the forest. King Ajahn did not believe them but only kept this to himself. Instead, he demanded that any kind wishing to visit the village must ask permission first and the reason why he intended to be at Ozulbaneg. If the reason was acceptable, such as visiting a family or relatives, he made the visitor an important guest of the village. If the reason was untrue, he sent the visitor to prison. In one occasion, as King Ajahn was dancing and celebrating a festival with his fellow Ozulbanegs, he just dropped to the ground and did not regain consciousness. A few days after, he died. Ozulbanegs had no idea what caused the death of their king. His sudden death was a great loss to the traditional Ozulbanegs, while it was seen by the Redfs and the Kajuna traders as opportunity. They expected that if Didi, then an Ozulbaneg trading with the Redfs, would assume the throne, the Redfs would be back at Ozulbaneg. However, King Didi disappointed them, for he continued his brother's legacy and policy. For 10 years, the Ozulbaneg village was regaining back its old traditions and culture. King Didi chose his advisors intelligently, as they all came from the ranks of the traditional Ozulbanegs. Though dressed in modern garments, their minds were of the olden ways. He was wise in keeping connections with the Redfs. He allowed a few Redf army to join the Ozulbaneg force and some to lead them like Dianat, for he wanted to learn the Redf skills and acquire their advanced weapons. In time, when the Ozulbanegs were ready for themselves, he planned to evict all the Redf soldiers back to their own land. Dianat sat beside the Nuga while the king and the others occupied both sides of the middle table. The advisors were still looking intensely at Leonardo, still in disbelief that before them, Piccola was in flesh and blood. The guards were standing around their backs until the king spoke, as each word were translated by the Nuga to Leonardo, who was sitting at the other end. It was only when Tatutida spoke that the advisors also realized that another guest was there and with them. The advisors were stunned the second time, having seen a Nuga for the first time, but the king made them calm down and told them about the Nuga. They all smiled together at Tatutida. That gave the Nuga a hidden feeling of joy. His kind has been vindicated, he thought. We are honored to have you as our guests. For the very first time in the land of Ozulbanegs, we are visited by a kind that resembles the face of our god, and a kind that for several years have been in our imaginations as haunted and evil. The myths and perceptions created by the past are now proven to be untrue, for the Nugas were far from what we believed they were. They were just mere victims of blindness caused by the wrong assumptions of a few who quenched their burning desire for revenge by spilling the blood of the Nugas in the past. Tonight, this dinner is for Piccola, who sent a mortal resembling his own form to save the life of an Ozulbaneg, for the forgiveness granted to us by a Nuga whose kind we cursed for years on the basis of stories that were all lies, and for the truth facing before us all, erasing all the things that all Ozulbanegs believed in for years. I propose a toast for our visitors, and may they bring good fortune and peace to the Ozulbanegs and our far brothers somewhere. The king and the advisors cheerfully raised their containers filled with the golden liquid while looking at Leonardo and Tatutida. Leonardo did not understand everything that the king said, for Tatutida stopped translating the king's words while looking intensely at the food served before them. The king nodded and smiled at Leonardo as he began to drink the wine until the container pot was emptied. The advisors followed. Leonardo, sensing the tradition, lifted his pot and was about to drink the colored liquid inside when Tatutida screamed in Leonardo's language, telling him of the poisonous substance served before them. Since he sat down and watched the food and drinks before them, the Nuga sensed something was wrong. Through the years scavenging in the forest, he knew about food and liquid that could be eaten and drank, and he knew that what was sumptuously served in the table contained a poison, the most vicious poison on earth, Ali. Ali was a rare species of a plant that grew in Hapa and Nasnev. It was an odorless and colorless poison that attacked the nervous system, making the muscles of the body stiffened and paralyzed from head to feet until the inner muscles of the organs choked the heart, making one die of cardiac arrest. It acted faster than any other poison and only a Nuga could smell it distinctively. Dionat was fast sensing the warning given by the Nuga to Leonardo and cut Tutudida's throat. Guards resembling the looks of the Redfs emerged from behind Leonardo as the other guards who were Redfs killed the Ozalbaned guards with them. Leonardo saw the king and his advisors struggled from their chairs as if the rope tied them up that they were resisting hard. The king's face was of pure anger, looking sharply at Dionat, and his hate seemed to have transferred to his veins as it embossed the skin on his neck. His heart began to choke and he broke the clay pot in his hand as he gave his last breath. 4 Redfs were holding the arms and shoulders of Leonardo while one was choking him from behind using a thin but strong like string as they held him onto his chair. For the very first time in his life, he hated and his anger unleashed the sleeping monster in him. He stood up, raising all the Redfs that were clinging onto his body. The hair at the back of his hands stiffened as he let out a loud scream resembling the growl of an angered bear. He then hit them one by one and each one that was hit fell to the floor lifeless. He held onto the arms of the Redf, choking him from behind, and threw him onto the wall, knocking the Redf's life out instantly. The other Redfs hit back with arrows and swords, but his clothes protected him. One by one he killed the attacking guards and each blow he made was fatal. Dionat saw that his guards were losing against Leonardo. He ran out to the door leading to the alley as he shouted for help from the other guards of the palace. As the last of the guards in the room fell from his hands, Leonardo went to the lifeless Tutudida, who was profusely bleeding and slumped onto his chair. Leonardo held the Nuga's hand as Tutudida stared at him, and though in pain, tried to smile as tears fell from his eyes. He spoke slowly in a choking voice. AHK, Tha, NKHK Iha, 4, Vin, Ditch, adding, are kind, but no, hone, hold, now, hey, are al, dead, premise, mhi, tell, ak, them, bow, uhs, tell. Leonardo saw Tutudida's red eyes closed as his head gave in and leaned to the right. The Nuga died before him. He pressed the Nuga's hand and bowed his head as he gave a short cry. Behind the walls, he heard hundreds of footsteps leading to the large room. He ran to another door from where he emerged and went up to the stairs. As he went to the hallway, he passed 2 Ozalbaned guards along the way leading to his room. His looks surprised them more than his swift presence, as the guards were frozen like the others, seeing their god before them. He ignored the man, quickly got his bag and ran into the balcony. He heard rushing footsteps and Dionat's voice giving an order. They are with him. Shoot them. Leonardo heard bodies dropped onto the alley. The Ozalbaned guards were slain. He jumped onto a tree and fell on its branches, but the branches could not carry the force that hit them as it broke. But Leonardo, using his acquired skill on trees, safely hanged as he landed feet first on the ground, and vanished into the woods.